On Tech Today, we have a very special guest. I'm here at the Dyson campus in Malmesbury, and we have with us the man himself, Sir James Dyson. What a pleasure to have you with us on the show.
Well, thank you for coming such a long way to see us, and it's great to see you.
James, when we're talking about technology innovation, do you look at particular regions, say India, and perhaps design a product in a particular way? Because technology solves problems, right? We look at it for solutions.
You've asked a really interesting question. I mean, 22 years ago, our market was substantially in Britain and one or two other places. But since then, we've gone global. We've burst across the globe. And we now have, as I just said, a lot of engineers in Asia. And we've done that because Asia is the fastest growing region. And it would be arrogant to think that I could sit here, and I don't sit here because I'm often in Singapore and Malaysia, to think that we could develop products for Asia from here. So we very much develop them for Asia first, often. And our first major market was Japan, and we started making our products a lot smaller for Japan, because Japan likes smaller things. And then we found the rest of the world likes smaller products as well. They want lighter, smaller products. And now we're in India. India presents some different issues. And I'm sure in the future we'll be designing products with India in mind, as indeed China, Japan, and a lot of the other countries we operate in. So we are prepared to do a product just for one country. We've done that already for Japan. We did a very, very small cylinder vacuum cleaner for Japan, which we didn't really sell anywhere else. So yes, basic answer to your question is we love doing that. And it's interesting because although sometimes we do it specifically for one country, we suddenly discover that other countries want it as well. So it's important to get all those cultural influences.
You know, building on that answer, James, when we talk about India, you made a trip to India very recently, and the call back home is to make in India or to manufacture in India. Is that on the cards for Dyson?
I can't say yes, but it's very much on the cards, as to use your phraseology. We would love to do that. At the moment we're selling only through our own shops and other direct and other means. It's a really interesting and important market for us for lots of reasons. I mean, pollution is one thing. We've been making home devices to purify the house for some time, and we've now launched a new product which is really interesting.
Right.
Which you put you wear like this. Have you seen this one?
And this is new.
And you can put this on here. There, like that.
Right.
And I'll just, sorry, it's so good, and I'm listening to music, I can't hear what you're saying, so I've had to take it off. But what it's doing, in here there's two pumps and filters.
Right.
And it takes in air, so it's playing music as well, right, because it's headphones and very good audio as well. And then through this device, it's pumping the air, purified air, and you breathe it through your mouth and nose. And it doesn't touch your face. So the difference between it and a face mask is that this gets all steamy.
Absolutely.
And it smudges your lipstick and all that sort of thing. Whereas this doesn't touch your face, and actually it cools your face. So actually it's very, very pleasant to wear it, particularly in a hot country. So that's an example of how we react with a totally, I mean, no one's ever seen anything like this before.
Yeah, absolutely.
To solve a problem that, you know, you're walking on streets or sitting on a train or on a subway or a bus, you're breathing in all those traffic fumes and tyre dust and whatever's going on. And this is a way to have clean air and music and not be affected by your environment. So that's an example of a product that was very much developed with India in mind. And India is also interesting because it's not a very sophisticated vacuum cleaner market, as I think you would acknowledge. And dust in a home is a big issue. Not only is it a difficult thing to get rid of and it goes everywhere, but it's also not very healthy, particularly for people with respiratory problems. And then hair care and floor care, but particularly hair care, is done really well in India. You know, you have wonderful hair and you want to style it and make it look great. So that's done extremely well.
A big part of being an inventor essentially is also being able to cope with failure, because it's not like you get a bullseye on every shot. There are things that creators, inventors, creative people try out and they don't necessarily work. How have you dealt with failure in the past?
Well, as you pointed out, you can't make progress unless you experiment. And if you experiment and do something different, something new, you're almost bound to fail multiple times before you make a success of it. We just have to get used to the fact that our whole day is going to be full of failure, experiments and failure. But I find failure interesting. I find it actually much more interesting than success. Success is there and there's nothing to learn from it. But every failure you learn something from viscerally. You feel it and remember it. And I've always worried about education actually, that we teach people to be successful first time, to give the right answer first time. And that is important in quite a few things in life. But if you want to make progress and do something different, you've got to be prepared to fail and have multiple failures and bounce back from it and learn from it before you attain success. And the funny thing is that afterwards it looks like an act of brilliance, but it wasn't. It was an act of perseverance, stamina and perseverance, and a willingness to accept failure. And I always say that you know, ours is a life of, or my life and those of my engineers here and around the world, is a life of dissatisfaction, because we're not satisfied with anything we do. We want to do better. We want to make it better. And actually, I think, curiously, that being dissatisfied is actually quite a happy life.
You know, James, that's interesting, because in my head, the next question was all about contentment for creative people or for inventors. So, by your logic, not being content and continuing to hustle is a good thing.
Well, I believe it is, and I'm backed up on this by research done by the University of Exeter, who looked at various professions and looked at the levels of happiness in those professions. And you're not going to like this, but being in the media was one of the least happy professions. Medics were about in the middle, and engineers were right at the top. I've thought about that a lot, and you know, maybe it's this constant change, never being satisfied with what you're doing. You know, when you launch a product, you've got the next one waiting in the wings, and the next one behind that. So I mean, what you've done is great, what you're launching is great, but you're dissatisfied and you've got a better one coming along, you know. So it's, I suppose, a life of there's hope because you believe you can do something better. And it's exciting because although you're launching one product, you've got the excitement of another one behind you. So maybe that's why engineers are happy. Because although they're permanently dissatisfied and not happy with what they've just done, they know there's more excitement along the way.
James, you know, that sort of revelation makes me want to reconsider my career choice. But that said, what you've done at Dyson is massive. And a lot of technology, well, industry people or big innovators in this space have done big things in the tech world, especially in the US, but they've done that by going public. Right. This is a company, Dyson, where you've consciously decided to keep it private. Is that something that would change in the coming years? And also, I'd love to understand your rationale for doing so.
No, we'll never go public. And that's, in a way, that's being slightly unambitious, in that presumably if we went public, we would get a lot of public money and we'll be able to do a lot more, and we'd be able to perhaps have done our electric car, which I didn't dare do as a private company. But I prefer it as a private company, where we own all the shares and all the decisions are our decisions. And by the way, they're all product-based decisions. Every decision about the company is about the next product or the products we're making at the moment. There's no stock market decision. There's no outside investor decision putting pressure on us to do something or to increase our profits by 30% year after year or whatever it is. So any pressure comes from within. And I just think that's much healthier and a much happier position to be in. And so we are what you would call a family business. My son works in 2 offices across there. He's running the business with me, designing the products with me. And my other children are also interested in it and take part in it. and I hope it'll be a multi-generational family business, but that's not, I can only pass it on once, which I hope to be able to do sometime, but I'm enjoying it enormously at the moment, so I don't see myself stopping now. But it's, I think, a terrific advantage to be a private business. We can also take risks that perhaps the CEO of a public business wouldn't be able to take, and we can take a long-term view. And we can also take a view about things like architecture. We can afford to build more expensive buildings, whereas a public company would have to build pragmatic buildings because, you know, that's shareholders' money. But I can take the view that we can spend twice as much on a building because I want to build beautiful buildings that will last and which inspire people who come to work in them.
Fascinating, James. You mentioned the electric car, and that was something which was very close to your heart. In the future, do you think if you were to revisit that thought, maybe it would pan out differently and maybe we could see attempt number 2? We spoke about failure and being resilient.
Yes, I would never say no, but we've been developing new technology batteries, and for the car and for our other products. We make a lot of battery products. One of the reasons we didn't continue with the car was that we knew we had to put a huge investment into the battery, because gigafactories are very, very expensive things. So I couldn't do both. So maybe when we've developed the battery and got that into production, then one could reconsider it. So it's because one of the reasons we want to do it, apart from the fact that we've been trying for ages to solve vehicle pollution problems, and these are, you know, this is one way of doing it. But we used to have a system that collected diesel exhaust pollution on the car, but no one in the industry would fit it. So we gave up. But coming back in with electric car and with these was a way of fulfilling our ambition. But we make electric motors, so we developed a very interesting electric motor for the car. Well, we had 2 of them actually. Air pollution and air heating and cooling is something we do, and air filtration is something we're keen on. So the car seemed a very logical thing to do, because that's what an electric car is. It's a battery, motors and air filtration and heating and cooling, and that's what we do. So it may well be something we come back to.
James, what an absolute pleasure to have you on Tech Today, and this has been a fascinating chat, and I'm going to go on and explore the Dyson campus. Thanks again for joining us.
Well, thank you for coming all the way to see us, and I'd love to see you soon in India.